I was always tremendously bored sitting in offices and tired of reading the same old magazines. And I thought it would be great for patients to have something to kind of take their mind off of their visit to the office. And while dentistry has come a long way, it still probably isn't the most favorite place for people to be. From a patient standpoint, I know that some of the original dental instruments are pretty rough looking, and they oftentimes will remark, you know, I'm kind of glad that we're not going to be using that stuff today. I actually took over practice for a periodontist that had been in practice for about 40 years. And when I did, I started to look through some of the cabinets, and I found a couple of unique little dental antique things, old things, and I thought it would be neat to have a little display in my waiting room. I probably have, I'm probably approaching about 10,000 pieces as part of the collection. One of the first things I found was an old mouthwash bottle from many years ago, and that I thought was interesting and led me to start searching for some other old products, and it was mostly old products. I remember going up to the antique days at Smith's Grove, and similarly there was a gentleman who was selling out an old drugstore that had closed, and found a bunch of antique dental products and toothpastes and things like that. And that's probably at the beginning what really got me interested and got me going. Then the next thing that happened, I saw in the newspaper that there was an auction in Cave City, and they were auctioning off the estate of two gentlemen who were dentists in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And part of what they were auctioning off was a dental chair that had come out of their office. And I went up there, and much to the dismay of my family, I was the successful bidder and had this dental chair, and that's really what sparked the whole interest. And at that point, I became an avid dental antique collector. One of the things I've enjoyed the most is trying to find out the story behind a lot of these items. Who owned it, who used it, what their practice was like, what they were like as a person. And it's added kind of a whole new dimension to it, which is enjoyable. The chair from 1865 is certainly the highlight, and the story that goes along with that really ties into the history of this area. The two dentists were Dr. Thomas, H.B. Thomas, and Dr. G.A. Thomas, and they were way ahead of their time. In fact, Dr. G.A. Thomas, who was the father, was an entrepreneurial type person, and he was kind of the preeminent dentist in that area. And I found out where his office was located, went up, and it was right above where the Horse Cave Theater is now. And I actually was able to find a photograph that not only has a picture of the front of his office, but actually has him hanging out the window. And if you look pretty closely, you can see the chair itself that was in the main room there. A patient had come in who had transferred to this area from Michigan, and said, when she saw our waiting room, said, "Oh, my dentist, his office was very similar to this. He had a lot of old things in his office." And that kind of sparked my interest, and I found out who he was and contacted him, and it just so happened that he was getting very close to retirement and wanted to know what he was going to do with his collection. And we negotiated a fair trade, and I ended up driving up to South Haven, Michigan, and we met in the parking lot of the local Big Boy restaurant and made the big exchange. And mostly what his collection was a lot of the old toothpastes and mouthwashes. And I have a specific little area in my office where those are on display. And they've been really neat. Patients will look at that and go, "Oh, I used to use that," or "Oh, I remember that." One of the very interesting pieces that I have is an old foot pump bellows, and it had a stamp on the back of it as to the company that manufactured it. And that company is still in existence today, and just kind of off chance, I sent them a letter and sent them a photograph of it and said, "Do you have any information about this piece and what it was used for?" And there was an elderly gentleman who was kind enough to sit down at his typewriter and type out a letter to me explaining that at the time what dentists would do is they would take a rag soaked in ether and they would put it over the diaphragm of the bellows, and they would then attach a tube through it from it to into the patient's nose and use that to deliver anesthesia. And the general feeling was, or the explanation from the company was, that if you were involved in a nasty extraction and the patient started feeling it, just a few good pumps on the bellows would get the patient to where they'd be comfortable to do what they wanted to do. Probably the biggest enjoyment, though, that I get out of it is when we'll have a patient, and in the very few times that they have to wait in our office, I thoroughly enjoy when my receptionist will call the patient to have them come back, and the patient will say, "Oh, no, just give me a few more minutes to look around." I enjoy the fact that they enjoy it so much.